Good morning, afternoon, evening, guys. You're locked into Conscious Mind CD, and this is the Cotch with D.V.G. And this is episode 8. And today, my very special guest is Thomas Thompson, and we're going to be talking about the creation story in relation to the Bible. And this will be the creation of the races and also the structure of the cosmos, touching on stuff like angels, the Anunnaki, and also on the current subject of flat Earth and the different models of the disc model and the square and diamond model. How's it going, brother?
Hello, how's it going? It's a pleasure to be on your show again.
It's all good. Hopefully this time we can get it on properly.
Yeah, we'll be able to do that.
No problem. Before we get into the main topic, I always ask my guests how they got into this type of information. Was it a specific time in their life, or was it through their career? Just explaining how you got into these esoteric subjects.
Basically, I was born and raised into it. My foster father was a 32nd degree Mason and Shriner. And ever since I first learned how to read, I was reading all the mystery books in the library as far as like UFOs, aliens, Bigfoots, anything that had to do with the supernatural ever since I could read a book. That's what I've been reading and researching my whole life. I didn't really get into serious mystery school type doctrines until probably about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's when I pretty much condensed. So the story that I'm going to tell you today is pretty much isn't based on one specific thing. It's really based on a lot of different information that I've been able to gather over the last 30 years.
Yeah, that's understandable, because that's just natural where we gather information and just syncretize it, basically.
Right.
So
we got to get to the pieces and put the pieces together, you know.
Exactly. So how can I say, the basis of this show happened from a post that you actually posted on your Facebook, which was about the creation story in Genesis, and you mentioned about how in Genesis chapter 1 it talks about God, and then in the next chapter it talks about Lord God, and we discussed with the people on Facebook about how Lord God is different to God, and you was going to elaborate on that. So when you're ready, feel to do so.
Okay, yeah, that's a good place to start. All right, well, first of all, let me grab my Bible here so I can actually read the actual verse. We have two main books that we're going to be talking about here in Genesis, chapter 1 and chapter 2.
Yep.
And we're going to be taking basic notices between the two chapters. One of the big notes that I'm aware of here is in chapter 1, you read all the way down through chapter 1 through the 7 days of creation. It says God created, God said, God saw, God called, God said. And it does this through the entire chapter 1 for the entire creation. And then at the beginning of chapter 2, God rest. Then at the end of chapter 2, you have a new deity that steps into the scene called Lord God, or Yah, as we know him, Yahweh, Jehovah, and various other names. So we have Yah, who steps in as Lord God. And now if you look at your scriptures and compare them, chapter 1 will be God, and chapter 2 will be Lord God.
Yeah.
Now, what we're concerned about here is in Genesis chapter 1, after our light dominion over the fish. Okay, and then in 27, God creates man in his own image, and in the image of God created him, male and female created he them.
Yep.
Now, let's go back to that one specific verse here, what God did, because we're going to note a difference between God's creation and Lord God's creation. Because we're told in the modern churches today that chapter 2 is just a retelling of chapter 1. It's still talking about the creation of Adam. And I plan on showing here that no, it's completely two different creations, two different entities, and two different times.
Yeah.
Now let's go into Genesis 1:27. It says, God made man, so God created man in his own image. In the image of created he him.
You there, brother?
It
You've
doesn't
cut
say he
out.
created him and her. It just says he created him. Then it says he created him, both male and female. Hello?
Hello. Yep. I think there's a bit of a delay and a bit of a some kind of something keeps cutting out. But can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Yeah, you're coming through clear as day.
Okay, it's all right now. Carry on where you was going from, brother. Sorry, it just cut out then. I don't know what happened.
All right, so God creates man in his own image. Now, take note that he creates man in his own image. It doesn't say he created man and woman in his own image. It just says he created man in his own image.
Yes.
In the image of God created he him. So again, he uses a second male term, him, to verify we are talking about a him.
Yeah.
Then it says male and female created he them.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm telling you this means Adam and Eve were both there at the same time, but they were in one body.
Yeah.
Now, if you look through various of the occult drawings and paintings and stuff, oftentimes you'll see an image of Adam with two heads. One will be male and one will be female. So this idea that I'm talking about right here about a dual-sexed creature is not an original idea. It's not something that I've made up.
Yeah.
This is something that can be verified through all the ancient texts. Now, when we get to the end of the creation, the 7 days, God rests, and that's the end of God. We have a creation of a creature here who is called man. It is both male and female, and it's been given dominion over the entire earth. Meantime, God is resting. We don't know how long God rests until Lord God finally steps up. For all we know, it could have been millions or even billions of years.
Yeah.
Now, who is this Lord God that's going to step up? Lord meaning Baal, or Baal, Moloch, Yah, Yakub, Yahweh.
Yep.
This creature was one of these original people that was created in Genesis chapter 1. He was one of these dual-sexed creatures. Now, what happened here is this creature, Yah, creates a garden. We call it the Garden of Eden. It seems to be some type of, I don't know what it is, a laboratory, I guess we could call it. And he takes one of the original men from the original creation, and he places them in that garden. Now, what he's going to end up doing is he's going to go in there, separating the genes out, and separate the male from the female. And that's how we get our story of Eve is made from a rib taken out of the side of Adam.
Yep.
Eve literally is taken out of his side, meaning she is literally cut. They are literally cut in half. Now they are two. So this is where we get the concept of marriage, where the two shall become one flesh, and two spirits shall become one flesh, two bodies shall become one flesh. It's from this desire to rejoin, because it is believed.
It's in our natural state, basically.
Yes, exactly. It is believed that that's our natural state, and that this creature who divided the sex and created two creatures, it'd be like taking an asexual worm and then dividing it up and making a male worm and a female worm. It's the same thing. So it was believed that this was done with malicious intent. And there are groups of people out there who believe that this is actually referred to as the demiurge or the devil. That the serpent isn't the devil. The serpent is more than likely one of the original people who had was probably like a lab assistant or something, was assisting through this and exposed this whole thing to Eve. Now, moving on to once we have two creations now. We have the original man that's been running the world for who knows how many millions of years, gave us the legends of Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, all these ancient civilizations, all the megalithic structures that we can't solve, like Stonehenge, or maybe not Stonehenge, I believe that one's fake, but the various Peruvian megalithic cities where they got these giant, 10-ton stones.
Yeah, I've looked into that. There's Cusco in Peru, isn't there?
Right, yes. These were all of the first people, the first generation that God created. These are the sons of God. They're called the sons of God because they were directly created by God and put on earth. So
can I ask quickly, brother? You see, the sons of God. We mentioned this last time, but just to re-clarify, were these people actually physical beings, or were they more of a ethereal, spiritual kind of beings?
Yes, they were more of a spiritual being, because we're going to find later when Eve eats the fruit that is where we take on our flesh and finally get our flesh form.
Yep. Okay.
At this point, we're still in the astral realms.
Yeah.
And now everything is still what would be solid if you were an astral being. I mean, it's not like a ghost realm where nothing can touch you. Everything is still solid, but it's on a higher vibrational rate. It's closer to the pure light. So yes, everything here, it's still a world, it's still Earth, there's still cities and continents, civilizations, but it's on a higher astral realm. So that's where Adam and Eve actually got separated, was still at that point when they're in the higher spiritual realms. Now, once she eats the fruit, and we'll go into that story here in a second, that's when we have the descent of carbon upon the entire astral plane, and that's how we ended up becoming this three-dimensional carbon-based life form, and everything in our existence right now is carbon-based. And a lot of things during this conversion, a lot of things instantly petrified, and that's where we get a lot of the stories of the Medusa and stuff. Like you'll find petrified mammoths, petrified dragons, petrified elephants. They look like, elephants carved out of stone, but they're not carved out of stone, and it's not a natural formation. It was actually a real elephant. But when this descent happened, the carbon-12 settled into everything and literally solidified everything and petrified it. Yeah. And whatever. Now, this was done for a reason. The whole reason this petrification was done, this was done because Eve ate the fruit. That was the whole idea of eating the fruit. And I do understand that there's a sexual meaning behind this too, and we'll go into that in a second.
Yeah.
However, Eve eating that fruit, when she did that, that literally locked us into flesh and literally turned this place into a prison that we know it to be today. Now, as for the sexual relationship, we go in there and we find that the serpent offers Eve fruit. Now, if I ask you, what is fruit? What does it mean to be fruitful? What is the fruit of your loins? Clearly, you can see the sexual nature of what I'm talking about here.
Because in the Bible, he talks about they talk about being fruitful and multiplying as well.
Yes, it does. Yes, and then it also uses the term that the serpent, obviously not a talking garden snake, seduced her. Seduction again is a sexual term. So we understand something's going on here. Now, here's what's going to go happening. When she takes this fruit, immediately the carbon-12 descends on her. God is forced to give her clothes, not a goat skin or a sheep skin like they teach, because this wasn't a physical world, but we're talking about flesh and bones and muscle, hair, blood cells. This flesh body is what God gave you. But now, upon this eating of the fruit, this is partaking in the sexual nature. So Eve partakes in a sexual activity with this creature that we call the serpent, who obviously, again, is not a talking garden snake, having sex with a human. The term actually means brilliant, lighted one, or shining one. It just means one of the original people.
Sorry, could I ask a quick question, brother?
Sure.
See the serpent, could it also be an allegory for like Satan and Saturn? Because they say once we come through the rings of Saturn, or
that's Yahweh. That's Yahweh, not the serpent. Yes, that is Yahweh.
Okay, right. I understand. Yep. Okay,
yes,
carry on.
Matter of fact, that was an excellent point that you brought up, and I'm glad you raised that, because when you talk about Yahweh, you are talking about Saturn, and when you are talking about Saturn, you are talking about something that we refer to as time.
Yep.
In the black cube, and we can go into that at another point. But now getting back to this, so what happens here is this serpent, which was one of the original beings, teaches Eve sexual activity. He teaches her procreation, because here's the thing: now that she has flesh, she ate the fruit. Well, the curse was the moment, the day that you eat this fruit, you're going to die.
Yep.
Well, it wasn't a curse. It was, he's telling, if you decide to undertaking this is what's going to happen. You're going to die. Now, but there was a plan. She did this on purpose, mind you. So anyways, she ends up learning the sexual arts from the serpent. So when they do this, she becomes impregnated with Cain. Now she turns to Adam now with this new knowledge, and she engages with Adam and teaches him the new science of sexual activity.
Yeah.
And she becomes pregnant again with Abel. So now we can see the true reason of why Cain and Abel truly don't like each other, and where it's all beginning, because there's going to be another big battle between these guys, obviously, when Cain kills Abel. But when we get to that point, I'm going to question why Cain actually killed Abel in the first place. But now, so let's see where we're at here. Is the serpent has taught Eve how to have sex. Eve has had sex with Adam. They now have Cain and Abel. They are now in a complete physical world. When the Israelites are raised up, any original being that was left over at that point, that was still alive, that survived through the petrification of Eve eating that fruit, which is really one of the points, was to wipe out that first species. Well, the Israelites, if you read through your Old Testament, you'll find out that all these tribes that weren't related to the Israelites, that the Israelites were told to go out and slaughter all of them, these were all the original people, the Ammites, and the Hittites. All these beings were the original tribe. And so when Adam came on the scene, he was not the first man. He was literally the first male. And Eve was not the first human. She was the first female.
Yep.
So the Israelites are created, and their whole job is to wipe out that original people and repopulate the earth. This basically fails because we ended up having to have the flood later on. And there's a reason why this fails, and it's a very interesting little story here. But before we go into it, you know what? No, I'll tell that part in a second. Okay, so here's what happens. As these two species are living side by side for at least 1,000 years before all this activity happened. No, wait a minute, I forgot to talk about Cain. Let's go back and talk about Cain for a minute.
No problem, brother.
Yeah, we need to understand where Cain's coming from in all this. Before Adam and Eve, there was no such thing as sacrifice. You didn't have Sunday sacrifice where you had to go sacrifice a lamb to the Lord or whatever, because the Lord wasn't God then. See, remember, Lord God didn't come in until Genesis chapter 2 when he created Adam. That's when sacrifice was required. Before then, I'm imagining a world, it tells me in Genesis 1, where everything was vegetarian.
Yeah.
Cats did not eat mice. They were good friends. Everything was friendly. Nothing died. Now, all of a sudden, Abel is grabbing up sheep and slitting their throats and setting them on fire in the name of God. I'm sure this traumatized Cain. Because no one had ever seen anything like that before. How are you going to react the very first time you've ever seen something like that? I'm thinking already, now, first of all, they got two different fathers, so there's already animosity between them. And they've been cursed that their seeds, they've been cursed that both of their seeds shall hate each other. So we can clearly see why Cain kills Abel. And when this happens, he's banished by Lord God. Well, the first thing comes out of Cain's mouth, and when he's banished, he says, but if you send me out into the world to be a wanderer, they will kill me. But the scriptures doesn't tell you who they are. Well, if you realize that Genesis chapter 1 was a whole different species of man, which we call angels today, by the way.
Yeah.
He was worried, Cain was worried about them finding him, because as soon as they see him, they're going to realize he's single-sexed. He's male only. He's obviously something that is perverted and should not exist in the original's eyes. So he felt that they would kill him. So Lord God put a mark on him somehow and sent him out, and Cain goes out into the land of Nod. They accept him, they give him a wife, and he ends up building a city. Just the fact that Cain, who was only the fourth person on earth or the third person on earth, is building a city should tell you that there's more than one person here. So, and going back to Genesis 1:26, when he created man, he said he created them, male and female, created he them, indicating he didn't just create two people and pull all races out of just them two people. He created 9 different species we know of angel. There's 3 classes of angel, and each one of them classes are subdivided by 3 classes. So we have 9 classes or 9 species of angel right there. So if you want to know where your races truly come from, right there is where you're getting your different species from.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing. When the serpent mates with Eve, we have a big problem here, because Eve is only half of what she originally was. She's only female now, whereas what's mating with her is both male and female. Now, here's what happens when you get one of these original sons of God mating with the female daughters of men. They give birth to a child whose pituitary gland never tells it when to stop growing. Our pituitary gland tells us stop growing at around 18 years of age. Well, now imagine if you're living in a day where you'll be 6, 7, 800, 900 years old, and you do not stop growing until the day you die.
Wow.
Now that's how this happened. And you know what? That is not unheard of. We see examples of this in today's world, and this is how you see it, is if you take a male lion and a female tiger and mate them together, you will create a liger. The male lion nor the female tiger, neither one of them have that thing in their pituitary glands that tells you when to stop growing. The opposite of their sex do. Like, for instance, the male tiger has it and the female lion. So you can mate those two and they'll just have an ordinary, half-breed child. But if you take the male lion and the female tiger, neither one of them have that thing in their pituitary glands that tells them when to stop growing. When they mate, they create a liger, and a liger lives far longer than both of the parents combined, and it never stops growing until it dies. It literally produces, it's literally a giant cat. So we can see proof that this science is true in today's modern world, that you produce these giants. Now, that was the big problem of Genesis 6:4, is that since these two societies have been living side by side for so long, and you can see perfect examples of this in Egypt all over the walls, where you see giants walking with ordinary sized humans.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is when them giants die, these are half-breeds. They're not the original creation, which can go to heaven, and they're not humans, which can also go to heaven. So they're cursed to roam the earth, and that's where we get today's demons. That's what a demon is. A demon is not a fallen angel, nor is a fallen angel a demon. They're two completely different things. The angels are the first people, which we say, we are told they became corrupt. That's why we call them fallen angels.
Yeah.
And then you have the original. So if you create, or if you allow an original dual sex being to mate with one of our females, you can mate with one of our males and nothing will happen. It'll just be an ordinary child. But if it mates with one of our females, the pituitary gland will create a giantism in the child, and the child will just keep growing. So by the time you get to Genesis 6:4, since these societies are side by side for at least 1,000 or 2,000 years, there's a whole lot of mating going on between the original people and the new people, the new humans. And because of this, giants are being made left and right. But people aren't really realizing the problem at first, because you don't become a giant right off the beginning. It takes you a couple hundred years to actually become a giant.
Yeah.
So yeah, by the time we get to Genesis 6:4, Lord God is just literally having a fit. He can't get anything done. He's got giants eating people. He's got first people mating with second people. the whole program is just an utter failure in his mind. Because we're told in the stories of Yaqub that this being, yeah, I know we say Yaqub is Jacob from Esau, but Yaqub is not. That's somebody else. We're told that he is upset with his people, with the original first people. He's an original man, and he is upset with his original people. And I am told that he told his people, he says, I'm going to make a people to rule you. And they just laughed at him and mocked him. Well, next thing you know, that's where the Israelites, Adam and the whole Israelite line came from. Is this whole thing where he was going to make warriors to literally take over and dominate the original world. So that's where we get the idea of Satan from. It's right there from him.
Does this correspond with the current day elite families and stuff as well?
Yes. Yeah, and that's one thing I forgot to mention about Cain also. When Cain being the son of both Eve and this serpent, when he was exiled from killing Cain, or killing Abel, he went to the land of Nod. This is a true angelic civilization. He learned all their sciences, obviously, because he spent the rest of his life among them.
Yeah.
This is where Masons today get their original knowledge, assuming that they can still understand the allegories and the meanings behind these sciences. This is original science that Cain is said to be the first Freemason. Of course, they didn't call them Freemasons back then, obviously. They were known by something different, but Cain was the first of this line that we call secret societies. And again, that's where this knowledge comes from. And it isn't that the knowledge is evil. It's just that we call the one holding the knowledge evil. We say Cain is evil because he killed Abel. Well, was Cain really evil, or was Cain... Well, here's another thing we talked about last time, and I forgot to mention it when we was talking about. When I said Cain probably had a problem with Abel killing that sheep or lamb, whatever it is he killed, or dove, whatever he was killing on his altar, remember what Genesis 1 said, everything was a vegetarian. So now what we're seeing here, that's Abel was the first carnivore. Well, he wasn't a carnivore, he was a herbivore, actually, I suppose. But this is the beginning of meat eating right there. Yeah. This is the battle of the vegans versus the meat eaters.
Wow.
Cain was an obvious, he planted fields, that's what he did. He was obviously, he was the vegetarian, he was the vegan. So war and death really started with the vegan killing the meat eater. And ever since then, it brought death upon the world. Everything has been predatory or prey ever since.
Yeah. Because I've always heard that even, like how you mentioned earlier about how cats didn't eat mice back then. Because I've heard before that the consciousness of the animals changed due to the changes of what you explained about us coming into physical existence and being more, how can I say, of a survival of the fittest type of mode.
Right. Yeah, and I did. I questioned that for the longest time, and I still question that. It's like the only thing that could cause everything to go from complete vegetarianism to carnivores and herbivores and omnivores and all the other things we have is it had to be a complete and utter change of your genetics.
Yeah.
I mean, for a cat, that's in its blood. That's in its genes. Chase a mouse, chase a bird.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like that at first. Now, how did it go from that point of let's be a friendly little cute furry thing hopping around to let's be, murder on 4 feet, But the only thing that can explain that is the descent of carbon-12.
Also, brother, I've heard that this also has some connection with like the cyclical ages, like the golden age.
Yes.
Like you have the iron age. Maybe this is why maybe they were going through a period of consciousness where it was lower. This is why they decided to do the experiment to separate.
I do think that there was I do believe that, because when you look through the older secret doctrines and stuff, it speaks about various levels, the etheric level, astric level, mental level, causal level, and so forth. it does give you the insinuation that the spirit, as it descends from pure ether into pure matter, is descending down through various levels. Now, exactly where the first angels lived, I'm assuming is on the astral level, which is only 2 levels up. Or actually, it's only 1 level if you count the etheric level as part of our level. But yeah, another thing I think about the scripture that says, I beheld Satan, as lightning fall. And, they were talking about, they see Satan as lightning fall to earth. Lightning falls pretty quickly. It's like instantaneously almost. And when we refer to Satan, we say, let him who has wisdom reckon the number of the beast, for it's a human number. It's number 603 square and 6, or 666. Yeah. We understand the 666 to be the carbon-12 atom, yeah. Which, according to physics, has 6 protons, 6 electrons, and 6 neutrons. That's the easiest way to explain it, unless you know about electrical theory.
Yeah, that's also makes 18, which is 1 and 8 is 9, and 9 is kind of number of creation as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's the folding over. It's the tail, where the tail is being bitten by the serpent's head, the Ouroboros, the cycle. So yeah, that's where how we ended up getting here. But now here's the thing we got to keep in mind about this world before, because this story can really leave people with a lot of confused thoughts. But here's the thing. When we go back to the allegorical story of Satan and Lucifer, or not Satan and Lucifer, my fault, Satan and Michael fighting in heaven. Satan is expelled from heaven. There is no place but heaven. This realm is created for them. This realm was created to hold them. This realm literally became what was classified as evil, pure evil. This is where the evil was exiled to from heaven. And it is, the story is told that God walked up to Adam and Eve, that he's not really the evil being that we think he is, Saturn and Satan, but he walked up to Eve and was trying to help man to develop individual consciousness, separation from the whole.
Yeah.
Is what he's, instead of being part of like a hive mind or a Borg type mind or a beehive type mind where we're all sharing one mind, they wanted that individual consciousness.
Yeah. So
what happens is, since this place had just become utterly corrupt, God tells Eve, or what actually wasn't God, it was the serpent. The serpent tells Eve, now, do you remember when God told you if you ate from this tree, you were going to die? And he said, yeah. Well, what he was really telling you is that this world, where this evil was exiled, you were made to be a gardener in this garden. But if you look around you, everything in this garden is flawless. This is the perfect garden of God. There's only one thing in this entire garden that needs fixed. And that's that tree, this tree right here. It has this serpent in it. It's a tree of good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil. He told you if you eat from it that you would die. But he also told you when you eat from it. That's telling you. He wants you to do it. He knows you're going to do it. The serpent knew this. He understood. He said, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to eat that fruit and partake in this material world, this three-dimensional world. And what the Most High wants you to do is to make this the most holiest place. Because right now, this is a place of corruption. You need to go down there. You need to incarnate down there. And you need to fix this mess. Make it even holier than heaven itself. And Eve agreed. She saw, yeah, this is good. This fruit is good for knowledge. It's good for wisdom. This is good for spiritual growth. And so she took a bite of it. And she turned to Adam and she explained to Adam, yeah, we're supposed to do this. We're not supposed to just ignore this tree. That's why we're supposed to eat it. The Hebrews say, if you read the original scripts, the Hebrews say that Adam and Eve had eaten off that tree within 1 hour of being created. That they only lasted 1 hour. Now, I don't know where exactly they get that number. I didn't come across it myself. But that is a teaching that they have among the Jews, is that Adam didn't even last an hour, and they already figured out So when God comes on to him and says, you ate from my tree. Or he says, did you eat from my tree? He's asking, what he's really saying there is, how did you know? How did you know I wanted you? I told you was going to die. You didn't know what death was, mind you, but I told you was going to die if you did this. How did you know to do this and not just, because normally, think about it, if you're in a garden, you're the only one there, you're a guy, God says, don't eat that tree. Don't eat from that tree. Chances are you're never going to eat from that tree. Why? God told you not to. It's the only rule you have. We're probably not going to do it. That's why we needed that helpmeet. That's why we needed Eve. So when God walked up to Adam and says, how did you know? How did you know to eat from that tree? And he was like, I didn't know. Eve knew. She told me. So it wasn't a blame game where we're blaming the female for, all the world's problem. No. He's giving her props. He's telling the world, like, he's telling God, no, I didn't know. I didn't have this figured out. I would have never ate from that tree.
Yeah.
But the woman, she convinced me of it, and she was right. And so he went up to the woman, and he says, well, woman, how did you know? And she says, I didn't know. The serpent told me. So, again, it's not a blame game, because how did you know that good and evil right there? Knowing the good and evil, how did you know before eating from the tree? The serpent had to instruct them. So the serpent wasn't the evil one here. The serpent was the ambassador, the one to explain the story, why we had to come down here. So that's really why we're here today. We're not here to commit mass genocide like we were intended for. We came here to make this the holiest place of all.
Yeah. Do you know what's really interesting, brother? You said about if they eat the apple, they'll die. Well, me thinking about etymology, well, anything that's spelt with D.I., like division, it means to separate, basically.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
And that's really the thing, because when you really think about what the Most High is, there isn't the Most High and then us, or the Most High and then its creation. There's only the Most High, period.
Yep.
Everything that we see, my body, your body, this house, this is just him morphing. That's what I like to call it. He's morphing into various shapes,
People call it like a fractal-based universe where like everything's a creation of everything else, and it's just a smaller part, basically.
Yes, this is literally one giant entity, and every single thing here is connected, and that's why it's connected, because there's only one thing here. The fact that you see a house or two houses, that's no different than me looking down at my hand and seeing, one skin cell sit next to another skin cell. It's all one thing.
Yeah, it's like the ocean and the ocean drops.
Yes, exactly. And when you are in a state like that, you can create angels. But the problem is they're going to be of the same mind of you. Now, you can isolate it and say, okay, well, you're the angel of the stars. You're the angel of nature and everything that's green. You're the nature of whatever, water. You can isolate your knowledge into sections.
Yeah.
That's what an angel is. He has isolated. That's why when Enoch goes to heaven and he goes up there and talks to the angels, he has to talk to each and every one to get a specific science that none of the other angels know. And that's why, because it's departmentalized knowledge. And what he's doing here, the whole point of Eve eating this fruit is to separate that being away from the Most High, put a barrier between it so that now there can be two. Even though there's still one, you still have the illusion now of two, and now you have the idea that you can worship the Most High or not worship. It is now your choice. So it was how individuality was built. If Adam and Eve did not eat from that tree, we would not have the individual nature of consciousness that we do now.
Yeah.
That tree literally represents all of duality. And without duality, you can't have love or hate, happiness or sadness, hot or cold. All these things that are dualities are because of Eve eating this fruit. She literally is the mother of all living. She's the mother of everything.
Yeah.
Because the moment she did that, carbon gave birth and destroyed everything.
Yeah. Continuing on from the creation, we spoke briefly about, you've mentioned it already, about Yakub and the story, and there's quite a popular story of how Yakub...
Yes. Now, the thing about Yakub, right, the thing about the Yakub is there's two different ways that I've heard the story told. Now, I've heard the standard traditional way, like the way Farrakhan talks about who Yakub was Esau's brother Jacob. And I've heard a lot of other ministers talking about Yakub as Jacob. Even though Jacob may have been involved in some genetic engineering, I personally believe that Yakub is this being in the garden, the one we call Yah or Saturn. Personally, I think that's who he is. But regardless of who we think, which one of these two characters we believe he is, here's the thing. Here's what's going on here. In our genetics, we have a dominant gene and we have a recessive gene. Now, if you only have one race and you're trying to, or you only have access to one man, and you have him isolated in a garden, and you're trying to create various different kinds of races, what you're going to do is what Yakub did, which is separate the dominant versus the recessive gene. How he would do this is he would have a recessive father and a recessive mother breed. And if any kind of dark dominant child was born, that child would be killed. And then if a light child was born, that child would be kept, raised, and married off to another lighter. Yep. So the whole process was to breed the lighter onto the lighter and kill off the darker until you get all the way down to an albino race. Now, from this starting, the story is told that the original was an Asiatic black man. So when this separation first occurred, the first thing that you would get out of it would be Nubians and Asians. Then you move down to, American Indians, or what we would call Indians, and Hispanics. And then finally, you'll get down to the albino. And then as the albino tries to breed back up, you get today's modern Caucasian race.
Yeah.
As it tries to breed in with the upper higher races. Well, not necessarily higher race. I'm not saying any race is higher than another.
Yeah.
But in the process of it, simply by introducing that albinoism into a darker yellow race, you might get a lighter yellow race up out of that. Or that baby's going to end up being no longer albino. It'll now have a tiny bit of melanin and a little color in it now. Yeah. So through 600 years, it was said that Yakub underwent this constant grafting and regrafting of these dominant and recessive genes. Now, with these new people that were created out of this, didn't exactly get along with everyone else that was already there. To make a long story short, Yakub and his people are all exiled, more or less. They have to go to the Isle of Patmos. I believe that's where he actually did his experiments, was on Patmos, where he did the actual 600 years grafting. To make a long story short, Yakub's people were ended up put up into the Caucasus Mountains. They were exiled completely from all southern areas. They weren't allowed to go over the mountain ranges. They had to stay there in the Caucasus Mountains. Because of this, all this time up there, where they would sit there until Moses would find them later, they would sit up there for 1,000 years. This is where we get the concept of the caveman, because these people were literally living inside the caves. These were not hairy, knuckle-dragging troglodytes. Well, they kind of were, but they were cavemen. But it wasn't because they were like less evolved or anything like that. It's simply because they
just geographically where they were.
Yeah, and they de-evolved because of their conditions. So I won't go into all the details, but their social structure completely broke down. They were doing some very nasty things.
Yeah.
We'll just say that. And but to make a long story short, these Yakubites were left up in the Caucasus Mountains basically to die or try to survive however they wanted or could. And then right around, when was it, like 2200 BC, Moses goes up in there and finds them. By this time, they're walking on all fours, and they just refuse to stand up. So there's a story about Moses having to tie boards onto their backs, which is where some people speculate that the Easter Island statues might get the boards that appear to be tied to their backs. That idea might come from there. We don't know. But anyways, he ends up raising these cavemen up back into relatively civilized, but not quite. They're still quite barbaric, still quite animalistic. And if you guys remember the birth of Moses, that was a very interesting story, because there's a lot of disagreement on this. But from the stories I read, the term translates that Moses was born with two horns on his head.
Yeah.
And that his eyes glowed and so brightly that the entire room was lit up. Well, bearing this in mind, that Moses has two horns on his head, bearing in mind that we have an entire race of people, unlike any other race, is now in the Caucasus Mountain. Caucasus coming from the word Caucasian.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, what's Moses do? He leads the people out into the desert where they spend 40 years. Well, they're not in the desert for 40 years. They're literally wiping out everything that's in Europe and taking over everything in Europe and up in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, all those areas. This is where you get today's Vikings. And this is
Wow.
the real reason.
Makes a lot of sense.
Right. This is the real reason. They tell you a bunch of stories. I looked into the whole Viking route, and it's a great mythology, great religion.
Sorry, brother. Can I just interject quickly? You see, how you say they went up to like the Scandinavian area and stuff. I've always found it interesting that a lot of, I don't mean to stereotype, but it's just an observation that, we've talked about like giants and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, a lot of like Scandinavian people are very like well built and very tall. And if you watch a lot of World's Strongest Man stuff, they're always Scandinavian people, and that correlates with the whole giant thing and what we were talking about earlier.
Oh yeah, and like I said, I've actually seen inlays in gold of Moses holding the two tablets of stone, that give you the 10 Commandments, and clear as day, he's got these huge Viking horns on his head. I've seen tons of these kind of images, and carved out of stone, made in paintings. So this is not an idea that I'm coming up with myself. This idea has been there. And again, there's no question about, Caucasians coming out of the Caucasus Mountain area. You can literally trace the whole B negative bloodline, because that's where we get our RH negative. All our RH negative comes from the original mating with the first original people with the human population.
Yeah.
So yeah, the RH negative, if you're wondering about the origins of that, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from Cain. Now where were we? I forgot where we were at.
Sorry, we was talking about the people going up to the Scandinavian areas.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's where we get our Vikings. They don't know this. Most of them don't know. They've forgotten. But they don't realize that their God that they're putting, their Odin. I'm almost positive they're talking about Moses himself. But yeah, because it doesn't make sense if you really think about it, that this little Israeli tribe would be stuck in that tiny little desert for 40 years. It does not take 40 years to walk across that entire desert. It just don't. I'm sorry, you can do that in less than a month. There's no way they were out there for 40 years. And that's not what they were doing. They were constantly being sent out to war. Where were all these wars taking place? Europe. All these wars with all these giants, and they would go up there and say, oh, well, we can't fight these guys. These guys are so big. We look like grasshoppers to them. I mean, they got grapes as big as our head. And, so they're telling you right there, there's giants up there. And by the way, this is after Noah too, so that tells you right there. That's another subject we never covered. How did the Nephilim survive the flood?
Yeah.
And a quick answer to that would be Noah's sons. When they were perfectly created, because Noah was perfect in his generations, therefore their genes were also perfect, so them four could not possibly have done it. But it does say that all flesh had become corrupt. All includes everything but Noah and what he directly created. This includes Noah's wife, and this includes Shem, Ham, and Japheth's three wives. Each of these three wives had the original Nephilim blood in them from three different races, and that's what we get today's modern races right there. It's from the three women.
Does Nephilim, if I'm not mistaken, would concur with fallen angel? Is that right?
Yeah, the Nephilim is the half-breed of the fallen angel and the human.
Yeah, because I'm just guessing again, because I love words. Nephilim is Ne, which is negative, and Elohim would be an elevated type of God.
Right.
So that's the kind of connection I made with.
Right. So we have fallen angel. We have fallen angel, and there's really no such thing as fallen angel. There's only the angel race.
Yeah.
Then we have the human race. Then we have the Nephilim, which is the half breed of them. Put them both together, and then we have demons, which is when a Nephilim dies.
Yeah.
All these people who practice demon summoning and stuff like that, they're not actually calling on fallen angels. If they're calling a demon, they're calling just a raging spirit that it will do anything to possess a host. That's all you got to do is give it a host, and it'll do whatever you want. That's why when Christ was sending legion out of the possessed man, they were like, well, let us go into them pigs over there, because they don't care where they go. They just need flesh to be embodied, because they can't go to heaven, they can't go to hell, they can't do anything.
Wow.
They just can be ghosts until judgment.
It makes sense.
So that's where we stand so far. That's pretty much my story on that.
Cool. What we're going to do, now we've covered the topic of creation in sense of like the races and people and different beings, we want to kind of move more on now to the creation of the cosmos and different theories and relate it to the Bible. And also, like both of us, we've come across the flat earth model in recent years, and it's been a very, how can I say, I could say a life-changing thing, because it's opened my eyes to many things. Because once you realize this part of the story, it just makes everything much more clearer. When did you start looking into the whole flat earth model, and who brought your attention to it?
Well, I came into it right at the beginning of the government rollout, which was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And back then, you didn't have all the celebrities you have today. Basically, you had two selections. You had like Eric DeBay, Paul Michael Bales, Tiger Dan 925, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
So I've been in this from the very beginning, and from the very beginning, I was an avid follower of the Gleason.
Yeah.
And I bring this up because I'd like to talk about something that's been real popular on Facebook lately, and that's Flat Earth Assholes video.
Yep. Definitely.
Now, here's the thing about what I discovered, and this only applies to me. When I first discovered Flat Earth, I was stunned at first. Well, first, I didn't even believe that somebody would put out such a video. Like, really? You're going to try to convince people the Earth is flat? And I clicked on it just because I just had to hear this nonsense. I mean, how could you possibly convince somebody? What are you going to tell me? And to make a long story short, Eric Dubay's 200 Proofs the Earth is in a Spinning Ball and other kind of videos, I watched all his little bit. Actually, I don't think that one came out until like a few months later. But anyways, my point is, it was Eric Dubay who really opened my eyes to Flat Earth. And the moment I saw the proofs, the moment I realized that, the horizon line was not the curve of the Earth, and the horizon didn't curve to the sides, when I realized the Earth absolutely was flat, at that moment, my respect for Eric D.V.G shot through the roof. If he could have went out there and told me the sky was pink, I would probably believe it. Because he just explained the greatest mystery that's ever been given to it. This is the greatest conspiracy ever.
Yeah.
He just solved it and handed it to me on a silver platter. And the funny thing about it is what people don't realize is when he handed you this flat Earth model, or when he handed you the flat Earth, he handed you an entire completely solved model with it. You didn't have to do no research at all. All you had to do was look. Oh, the sun goes in a circle. Oh, there's an ice wall around it. Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, the equator. Oh, it's very simple. Spinning dome. And he had the whole model all figured out. So when he showed me the Earth was flat, and then he automatically, without even proving it, he just handed me this whole thing about the ice wall and all this stuff. Yeah, I believed it, absolutely. This was the truth right here. I was not going to question that. And every time I heard someone talk about, that model's not right because of this and that, I'm like, oh, you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. You haven't been doing your research, man. Just do your research and you'll see. This AE map is right. You just don't know what you're talking about. Next thing you know, I just had this one woman who just kept coming back and kept coming back and kept coming back arguing with me. But she was arguing in a way where I couldn't just block her because she wasn't being rude. She was just...
Yeah.
And next thing I know, she started showing me this, showing me that, showing me this, and showing me that. And then I started meeting Lori Frary, Lawrence Wright, Darren Nesbitt, all these people. And I started looking into their research. And I realized, that AE is absolutely wrong. And I do have my preferred model.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to push my model on anyone. I'm not saying this is absolutely right and that I can prove every aspect of it. But personally, I do believe it's absolutely right. And I can prove every aspect of it. But be that as it may, I have chosen what we call the diamond, or what you know as a standard military grid UTM map, which is your basic rectangle map that you find in any airport, military base, shipping yard, postage company, for their planes and whatnot. It's just, on the back of news, when you're watching the news on television, usually you'll see this big rectangular map in the background. Now, I don't draw my outline as that rectangle. The continents are still set up like that, but we put them continents inside of a diamond. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
After about 6 to 8 months of being in the Flat Earth movement, I realized that the AE had too many flaws, and if it has even one flaw, it's not right. There's a difference between not being able to explain something because you don't have all the information, and something just being provably wrong.
Yeah.
I can provably prove the AE model incorrect. I can't explain Pac-Man to some people's standards, I guess. I can explain it just fine. To me, it makes perfect sense to me. And I will get into that and share that because I think it's very important. A lot of people are wondering, well, if the Gleason map doesn't work, then what map does work? Well, here's the thing, folks. Here's the thing about this. GPS is not that old of a system. Pilots have been flying for 100 years before GPS was ever created. Now, if the Gleason map isn't right, and it's not, and we didn't have GPS, and pilots were still flying every inch of Earth, almost. They were never getting lost, except occasionally, but it wasn't because of a map, usually. So what map were they using before we had GPS if we know the Gleason wasn't working? There is only one option. It's that rectangle UTM map. That's it. There's no other map out there you can use. No. Because all you have to do is get a list of international airports and start lining them up. Cut your continents out. Get the largest UTM map you can get. Cut all the continents out. Lay all 7 continents on the table. All around the edge of all 7 of these continents, mark 10 airports. And then map these airports to the 10 that's on all the other continents. So altogether, you'll have 70 airport listings, and each airport will be connected to 69 other airports. This will give you the exact layout of where the continents are. Then once you understand how the map itself works, You know, how South America sits in relationship to Africa, how the United States sits in relationship to Europe. Once you understand where the continents actually lay out, it doesn't matter if you can explain everything else. It doesn't matter if I can explain Pac-Man or not. If that map works and it lines up with every single airport, then that map is right. You have to accept whatever comes with it, whether you can explain it or not.
Yeah. Yeah, like myself as well, like I said to you.
I do have a very good...
Sorry, brother, carry on, sorry, and I'll tell you after.
Yes. You can look on my Facebook and my good friends, Lori Furry, Lawrence Wright, Darren Nesbitt, Preston Vaughn, Dave Marsh, a couple other really good researchers that I work with. You can look on, their pages and get a lot of great details about how our diamond map works. What I want to address here is the concept that most people have a problem with. Because here's the thing, I believe that if anybody goes and checks my map and they compare it with actual flight times and measure these airports, they will get that map. There's no question about that. They won't investigate it though, because they know sooner or later they're going to have to address the issue of what we call the Enochian gates, which is a four-dimensional system that literally connects all the edges of the earth. Now, I'll break this down since most people don't understand how it works.
Yeah.
I think I do. I'm not saying for a fact I do. I believe I've solved it. Can I prove it? It's going to be very difficult. I doubt it. But here's the key. The key came in, first of all, I've always known Einstein was wrong. Once I discovered the flat earth, I immediately realized he was wrong about everything he taught. But here's the thing. When Einstein was wrong, he was making correct observations. The problem was he was drawing incorrect conclusions. Tesla was drawing the correct conclusions, but they shoved him under the carpet.
Yeah.
But once I started studying Tesla, some of the stuff started coming out. I started realizing what it was Einstein was seeing. Einstein told us, he says, well, you know what? The planet is so heavy, it's bending space. And that's where we're getting this gravity from, But look, you can't bend space, obviously. You can't bend space any more than you can bend a shadow, because a space is not something, it's the lack of something.
Yeah.
Just like a shadow is not a thing, it is a lack of a thing. So you can't reify a shadow because it's not a thing. You can't reify space because it is not a thing. But yet he understood something was warping here. But you can't warp that. So here's the solution, folks. When you look at your diamond map, not the rectangle one, we call it the square earth or the rectangle earth, but it's really a diamond shape.
Yeah.
It's very important that, it's very important that you use that specific map. You have on a diamond, you have the north, which is at the very top point, and then the south is at the very bottom point. But you have two east and two west because you got the upper east and the lower east. You see what I'm saying on a diamond?
Yeah, so you mean like a bit above the equator and a bit below, is that what you mean?
Right, exactly. All the way up to the poles, because the north and the south are only at the exact tips.
Yeah.
Everything else on the left edge of the map, that's all west. Everything on the right side of the map, that's all east. Now, here's the thing. You have this diamond. Where does this diamond sit? Okay, this diamond does not sit in outer space, where there's other planets floating around and stars. There is no outer space. We've already established that, correct?
Yeah.
So where is this place sitting? Is it sitting in God's bathroom on a shelf somewhere? Where are we? Right. So where we are sitting in the ether. What is the ether? The ether is literally heaven. It is literally, and when heaven is in a charged state, it is, as part of necessity, it must discharge. So ether does not take up any space whatsoever. We see examples of ether in magnetism. If I shine, say, a magnet at a television, an old CRT tube, old tube style TV, I could mess with the colors real bad with my magnet. I didn't even have to touch the screen. but yet there was absolutely nothing between my magnet and the screen, but yet I was affecting the screen. These are fluctuations in the ether. The ether is all around us. I know a lot of people either don't believe in it or just don't know it exists because, again, Tesla was shoved under the rug. So ether is utterly spaceless. It is utterly timeless. There is no area to ether. It is a singularity. That's why all souls are connected, because all souls are literally made of ether, and ether takes up no space. And if ether takes up no space, then all souls must be connected to the exact same space that doesn't exist.
You see, within the ether, is this where, you see, you just mentioned about the souls being connected. Is that to do with like the ley lines and stuff? Or not really?
I think that would have more to do with the Earth's chakra system than ours. And, you know, we're born through these various lines,
yeah,
and things like that. But where was I at before that?
The ether, we was talking about the ether.
Oh, the ether, yes. I often lose track, sorry about that.
Sorry to keep interjecting, because I just like to...
oh, that's fine, yeah. I need the questions. It helps stimulate my thought and give me a direction to go. So anyways, with this ether is completely counterspatial, means it takes up no area whatsoever. Not empty area, no area. Yeah. Singularity we're talking here, okay? That's one property of it. Now, here's the thing. We have our diamond Earth. That's not a singularity. That's a three-dimensional, discharged dielectric material that has three dimensions to it. All right, now, this material world has to exist within this ether. The problem is that ether takes up no space. Well, if I go along the entire edge of my diamond, that means there's ether along that entire edge. Every one of my edges on my diamond, all four edges, are connected to the ether. But ether doesn't take up space. But that edge is obviously area, but it doesn't take up space. It has to go back, that ether has to return to its point of singularity. It has no choice, that's its nature. What's really happening here is it's folding over. For instance,
it's like a torus field. Is that what you're explaining?
Yes, that's exactly how a torus is formed. Is that eastern wall? Okay, let's an example. The sun comes in the east. It travels all the way across the map to the western edge. And then you're going to say, oh, well, what's it doing? Teleporting back to the east? No. The east and the west are actually connected to each other, literally. But remember what I told you. I said ether was counterspatial. So that which connects these two sides has no area. It has no size. It has no space. And it does not take up any time whatsoever, because time only exists within the three-dimensional realm. Time is a measure of magnitude. As magnetism expands through magnitude, those measurements of magnitude from this expansion is what we call time. Time is not an actual energy. It is merely a measurement. So again, back to our diamond Earth, or square Earth, however you want to call it. You have, like I said, on the diamond, you have two eastern sides and you have two western sides. And these two sides are literally, the Earth is flat. Yes, we have mountains and valleys, I understand that. But the Earth itself, reality, we live on a flat plane, a flat stationary plane. However, reality that we sit in, the ether, is literally folding that over. You perceive it as flat, it's still flat. Water is always flat, no matter how you look at it. I'm telling you, Einstein was wrong in the fact when he said space was warped. I'm telling you, no, counter space is warped. Counter space is the ether. The ether is forcing reality to bend in on itself. What you really have is a concave ball if you leave our flat Earth. If you were to exist outside the ether and look at our Earth, you would see a concave ball. It's flat to us. It's 100% flat. You can test it and you prove it. There's no question about it. It's flat. But you can only see the material realm. You can't see the reality that it's actually sitting in, and that reality is curved. All sides are connecting to all sides, so there is no teleporting. When you get in a sailboat and you sail over the international date line, you're not sailing through some magical tunnel. You're not teleporting. You're just there. Simple as that. There is no edge. You can't fall off the edge. The water can't drain out. None of these things. All edges are connected through the ether. And that's pretty much the end of that.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's very interesting to hear, because it's something that a lot of people who got into the flat earth, and obviously, like most of us, we all got into the round disc model and the Gleason model. And,
Yes.
For me, that was something that was always, I understand everything else of it, and I'm just thinking, how can you go that way and then appear that way? But
Right.
I kind of understand what you mean with the Taurus field. It's like the aura coming back to the center.
Well, and since you talked about the aura field, you remember I said there's a reason why we have a diamond. And the reason why is because now the North Pole and the South Pole, as you go from the equator to them poles, because it's a diamond, you're getting smaller and smaller radius all the way up to the point you get to the pole. That's how we're getting these rotating stars. You see the rotating stars in the north, and then you see the rotating stars in the south.
Yeah.
I know Gleason people don't believe there's a South Pole, but there is. There's two poles. They both spin east to west, or since we're standing inside of it, it looks like they spin in opposite directions. But if you was to actually step outside of reality, you would see that everything spins east to west.
Yeah. Yeah, because like that's a very hard concept for people to get in their mind. Even myself, I still, obviously, you've explained it, and I've heard other people explaining it, but it's something which I don't want to ignore, and I want to try to understand it. I still might not, and I might think, it's a load of rubbish or whatever. But
it's hard to grasp.
Yeah, but the best thing is, like we said when we recorded before, it would be ignorant of anyone to discard the. You don't have to agree with it, but I would say to most people to just look at it, because a lot of flat earthers moan at people who subscribe to the globe and say
don't disregard it just because they can't explain it. And they say, well, I can't explain that, so that can't be true.
Yeah.
Just because you can't explain it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yep, I understand that. And also, because I don't know if you saw, I did the map on my whiteboard, where after I spoke to you and I tried to syncretize some astrology stuff to it. Again, that's not me believing in the diamond model. That's just me picking up the information that I've received and trying to find out for myself. And I would just say, like, I might come to the conclusion where I think, you know what, I can't see it. But at the same time, I can't deny it until I investigate it.
Now, here's the thing I'd like to add, too. Since we were talking about Yakub earlier, the story is told. Do you remember the story of where Yakub's search, when he was beginning his search, and he found, when he first started learning science, what was the first thing he did in the story? Do you remember?
I'm not aware. No, I don't know the story in depth.
Well, the story is his science actually started with him playing with two magnets. He was just sitting there playing with two magnets, and he mastered those magnets. Yeah. The problem is most people don't realize exactly what it is he figured out. And that is literally the key. They're literally telling you that is the key. Study magnetism.
Yeah.
The reason I bring this point up is this. When you want to prove the Earth is square, you go look. Get your regular old magnet. Doesn't matter what shape it is. You put it under a ferrocell. You're going to see a plane of inertia. Well, first you're going to see a north pole at one end, and you're going to see a south pole at another end.
And they like the two owl eyes.
Yes, they do look very much. It very much looks like owl eyes. Yeah. They are dark. They're usually depending on the color of light you use. They're usually the darker shade of lighting, almost blackish color. And then between them two poles, you have a long line called the plane of inertia, or the block wall. We live on that block wall, and there's a north pole on one side of us, and there's a south pole on the other side of us. Yeah. Just like a common magnet, and this is why they don't teach magnetism in school. They teach you how to put some iron filings around a magnet, but that doesn't teach you anything about what magnetism is and how it comes from the ether. which is another subject we'll take on one day. But yeah, ether is literally everything. The scriptures tell us in 1 John 5:7, there are three who bear record in heaven: the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, and these three are one. What this really means in modern Tesla language is there are three who bear record in the ether. The ether, by the way, is consciously aware and fully intelligent. This is not just some dumb, blind energy. Now I'll get back to my verse here. 1 John 5:7, the Tesla version, or my version, I should call it. There are three who bear record in the ether. The Father, who is dielectricity.
Yeah, magnetism.
The Son, yes, the Son, who is electricity, and the Holy Ghost, who is magnetism.
Yeah.
So there are three who bear record in the ether.
Proton, neutron, and electron, isn't it, as well?
That would have to do with compression. That would have to do with compressions and ramifications. And I really don't want to get into that too much because I'm gonna have to start talking about charged particles, and personally, I don't believe in charged particles.
Yeah.
Like the photon and the graviton, which is a very important thing people need to understand if you're studying flat Earth, is you need to understand you can't just get out there and say gravity is not real, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but there's a phenomenon that's that's happening there. You have to be able to explain it. It's not enough just to say, oh, it's density and buoyancy. That's not what's going on. That's only a fraction of what's going on.
Is it, from what I've gathered from someone else, someone explained it saying that it's almost the positive and the negative charge kind of brings us to the middle. Is that?
It's part of that. It's partly that. You're almost there.
Explain, brother.
Okay, what's going to happen here is we have a cycle here. It's a repeating cycle. You start from ether. That is your 0 point energy. Your 0 point is ether. It is in a charged state. It discharges. When it discharges, that discharge, which is what creates the 3D realm, it discharges a magnetic field.
Yeah. This
magnetic field is literally the three-dimensional world. The existence of this field literally creates space. That's how you get space out of the singularity. Is you have this it's literally a magnetic radiation from a singularity. That's what your Big Bang is. It's not some super hot singularity that exploded. It's a magnetic radiation from a point of singularity. Now, it radiates out as magnetism. We call this force and motion.
Yeah.
It will return to its natural charge state because this is its discharge state.
Acceleration and inertia, isn't it?
Exactly. Acceleration and inertia is going to return. That's what gravity is. It is that incoherent dielectric acceleration. It is this energy, because everything is ether. That's why there's three, and these three are one, it says in 1 John 5:7. It is dielectricity, electricity, magnetism. These are all the same things.
Different modalities.
Yeah, exactly. It's like ice, water vapor, and liquid water. It's just three different forms of the exact same thing. It's what action is it doing? If it's radiating out, it's magnetism. If it's drawing back in and returning to a charged state, it's what you would term gravity. So that's what gravity is. Gravity is not a wave. It is not a particle. There's no such thing as a graviton. That is part of a cycle. So for the people who are trying to understand exactly what gravity is, and you're going out, to these real, incredibly intelligent Glovers, and you're going to try to just tell them any old kind of thing, these guys are going to destroy you. You need to know what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
And the problem is, first thing you need to know is Einstein was wrong about just about everything. However, he had correct observations. He was just drawing incorrect conclusions. If you want the right conclusions, study Tesla, study Walter Russell, Faraday, Maxwell, Steinmetz, any of these guys.
I hear these names a lot in Santos's presentation. He mentions every single one of them names.
Yes, and Santos, he's another great teacher. But Eric Dollard, he's like a genius. He's literally reproduced all of Tesla's experiments. These guys, electrical field theory, that's what you want to know. If you really want to know the secrets of flat Earth, Study magnetism. Look up a guy on YouTube called Ken Wheeler.
Yeah, I've checked his work out. I know Ken Wheeler.
He is the only man in our recorded history who has written a book that correctly describes what magnetism it is and how it works, what light is and how it works. He literally destroys everything in a very super simple science. He destroys everything that Einstein ever did. Study magnetism. Look up the secrets of magnetism. He puts out, when he wrote the book on it, it's a free book. There's 4 editions of it now, and they're all free download. He doesn't charge for anything. It's like he discovered it, and he's just literally trying to help the world. I think this guy is a great guy. But if you really want to learn about flat Earth, you're going to have to learn about what flat Earth is. Flat Earth is a magnet. This is an electric universe. And it's not enough just to know it's an electric universe. When I tell you it's an electric universe, most people aren't understanding what that means. That means the universe is not a bag of marbles made up of protons, electrons, neutrons, gravitons, muons, gluons, and any kind of other particle you want to have. These are all magic unicorn particles that deal with atomic sciences. Einstein's atomic science is garbage. It's wrong. It's incorrect. Tesla's field science, electrical field theory, is the ultimate divine science.
Because he said we live in a realm, didn't he?
Yes. Well, you know what? I want to address that. Yes, he did talk about that. However, there is a quote floating around Facebook. I see it all the time about the stars being connected to the firmament. That part Tesla did not say. That part was stated by Darrell Fox a little over 2 years ago, because I was there when he made that post. And he wrote that stuff down in the post and then claimed Tesla said it. Tesla did say some of that, but all the stuff about Tesla never admitted to being a flat earther, nor did he say the stars are connected to the firmament. And indeed, if you study a little farther into Masonic sciences, you will find out that the stars are not connected to the firmament. And that's another thing I'd like to bring up is...
Yep, definitely. Go ahead. This is...
If you want to know the true shape of flat Earth, I've already set up experiments on my Facebook page that'll help you to come to that conclusion. But here's the thing. Who's hiding the flat Earth? Well, it's the Masons, obviously. Every astronaut who's ever been has been a Mason. Admiral Byrd, who gave us the whole story about the ice ring, he was a Mason. So the Masons are the ones hiding the secret. So if the Masons are hiding the secret, who's going to know the secret? The Masons. You got to go to the Masons.
Yeah.
If you want to solve this mystery, and I'm telling you, it's all out there. And I've looked at this stuff for years, but every time I looked at it, I didn't realize what I was looking at. I didn't even realize I was looking at flat Earth in the first place. I'd see these crazy images, I'd see the poles, Jacob and Boaz, and they would tell me, well, Jacob and Boaz means this. Well, yeah, it actually does. That's why it's in the form of an allegory. But you know what else Jacob and Boaz means? It means the North Pole and the South Pole of the Earth. And that's literally what it is. Jacob is one pole, and Boaz is the other pole.
And so that means the black and white in the middle would be the Earth. Yeah,
absolutely. That's the rectangular Earth, or what they call the square Earth, rectangular Earth, diamond Earth, however you want to say it. But yeah, the Earth sits in between that. If you look on the Israeli Supreme Court's out in their front lawn, they have Jacob and Boaz in between it. They have this
pyramid,
yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw that on your post. Yeah, that's very interesting picture.
And then when you look into, like say the old Aztec and Mayan paintings of the Earth, you'll see a ball, and all the Gleason fans see the Earth is round. It's a flat, round disc. Now that whole ball that you saw there, that's not, it's not a round, flat disc. In the middle of that, if you ever notice, there's a pyramid in the middle, or it's a Mount Meru, or some other object is usually always in that dead center.
Yeah. That
dead center object, that's us. That's the entire circle that surrounds that. Like in the Mayan one, you'll see a big circle, and they have these designs all over the edge, and then in the dead center is a pyramid. We live inside the pyramid, inside the center. The rest of the Earth exists outside of this pyramid. And since we do know that there's water between us and the stars, I kind of wonder if we're not actually still inside of Noah's Ark, and if the Earth still isn't flooded. It kind of gives me the idea sometimes, like, because I'm looking up at Mars, or not Mars, I look up at Venus, I see all this water. Mars also has that, by the way. And every planet I look through I see water.
Yeah, because they're very they seem liquidy.
Right, and even when I look at each and every star, and when I shift from one star to another star, I don't have to change the focus of my camera. I just move my camera. That should tell you something right there. No matter what I look at, even if I look at the moon, I notice it's harder to see with the moon, but I notice you can still see that water-like on the moon. It's kind of like a wave-like projection, telling me that regardless of what's going on here, there's water between me and whatever I'm looking at. These objects, Venus isn't, I don't believe Venus is a water planet. I don't believe it's a water disk or anything like that. I believe it's probably some kind of magnetodielectric luminary object. We got something going on there. It's transverse XY with a longitudinal dielectric pulse. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. I'm still working out what the wandering stars are. But yeah, there's definitely water in between us and them. And then the story tells me that there's water on top of them outside, because there's three heavens where the birds fly, where the sun, moon, and stars are, and then outside of this place altogether. So yeah, I believe that there actually could be more Earth outside of our pyramid, that we've specifically been locked in here.
I want to speak to you about that, actually, because that's great you brought it up, because that kind of leads me on to a couple of questions that I have for you. But carry on, and then I can ask my questions after.
Yeah, well, I didn't have too much more to say. I was just going to say that I believe that that entire circle, like you see in the Mayan and Aztec giant circles, I think that actually is the Earth. What we know as a square Earth is like Pandora's box. It's literally been placed in the center, and that we're somehow locked into this. And I believe that Nimrod built the Tower of Babel specifically for that reason, because we're told that the Noah's Ark had windows at the very top of it. And I'm thinking Nimrod built a tower to find some of these so-called windows of heaven, because we're told in the scripture, there's windows of heaven that are built into our, whatever this dome thing is.
Yeah, that's another subject I want to touch up on as well.
So yeah, I'm thinking Nimrod built that tower. That's probably why we find all the damage to the moon. Maybe something happened that caused him where he had to go to war and shoot the moon repeatedly or something. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how that worked out, but we do see some crazy damage on the moon. And the problem is, if the moon's always facing the Earth and all them craters are on the face of the moon, obviously no asteroids hit it, unless them asteroids were shot from space, or shot from the Earth, I mean. So that tells you right there that the moon wasn't hit by asteroids, because the face of the moon never changes. We always see that exact same face. It's always facing Earth. So how's it getting hit with asteroids? It can't. So all them craters on there are not asteroid craters. These are blast craters. This is where somebody was shooting at that thing with some kind of incredibly large electromagnetic weapon. I'm not quite sure how it worked. Probably some kind of scalar wave. I don't know. But yeah, they were blasting the moon, and why they would do that in the first place, I don't know. But yeah, that's another fun subject to research, is why did Nimrod build that tower, and where was he going? Because I seen a Sumerian a cylinder seal. That's exactly what it shows. It shows Nimrod climbing out of a little hole, and then directly, he's got a sword in his hand, and directly above him is an angel. Looks like it's getting ready to try to kill Nimrod as soon as he gets all the way out of the hole. And the angel's armed with the sword, and these other guys standing on the side. Inky standing there. Waters are pouring out of his shoulders, indicating that there's water above the firmament, and that Inky is the reason for that. So yeah, it seems, if nothing else, we seem to be in a giant pond.
Yeah. See, that's the kind of idea I had anyway. But obviously, about us being in a giant pond, but obviously, like most of us, we said before, it was more to do with the whole ice wall and being holding the waters in and stuff. But
that's a problem I always had. That was one of the first things I always asked myself. I was like, well, how does this spinning dome connect to a non-spinning Earth? Is it like grinding into the snow and tearing up mountains? And how exactly is this connection made? Because that's how I saw it. You got this. Then what are you going to do? Tell me that it's an entire ball? you know, I didn't quite understand how that worked out. But once I have the flat Earth, I realize, or once I went with the square Earth model, another thing I realized is, remember when I told you that even though we're a perfect flat diamond, but we are literally inverted because of ether to connect all the edges into like a ball, or a maybe tetrahedron might be a better shape to call it, not a ball, a concave tetrahedron. Okay, that might be a better description. My point is, though, when you do this, if you fold Earth in on itself, the sky folds in on itself too. That means there's another object in the sky that literally is the stars. And you can actually see, I've seen images of this, very rare Masonic images. You'll see, usually on Jacob and Boaz, you'll see like the planet Earth will be on one pillar, and then on the other pillar you'll see
astrology usually.
Yeah, and on the other one you won't really understand what's going on. It'll be some kind of weird shape, you know, weird ball thing. Well, on a few of them, every once in a while, yeah, it'll be a black ball, and there's little white stars, and you can see constellations on it.
Wow.
And that's usually above the Boaz pillar.
Yeah.
And that's what gave me, you know, the clue that, hey, wait a minute. If the Earth is literally folding in on itself, then that means the sky is also folding in on itself. That means there has to be some kind of celestial sphere or celestial ball that's literally radiating everything that we call the stars. So that's how we get stars that turn one way. Like if you're looking east to west on the equator, let's say you're standing on the equator and you're looking east to west, you'll notice that Cancer bends up to the north and Capricorn bends down to the south. Well, if the dome's one single piece, these stars can't be spinning in opposite directions.
Yep.
If they're built into the dome, it won't work like that. But if there's merely a tetrahedron or a ball, I'm not sure which, it could be a tetrahedron or just a pyramid, dual upside pyramid with a downside pyramid, maybe, I'm not sure. This is the source of the stars. And as it spins, that's what's causing the appearance of the stars going around our torus field. That's my opinion. I am not saying that as absolute fact. I can't prove one word I just said here. I can prove ether.
Yeah.
I can prove dielectricity. I can prove electricity. I can prove magnetism. But proving that I can take a dielectric object, because see, the problem is there's only one example in all of creation where a dielectric object, like say the Earth, will meet a singularity like the ether. And that's only at the very edges of Earth. There's no place inside of the Earth you can go that I know of where you can create matter inside of ether. You can't go into a lab and say, okay, well, I'm going to make this little field of ether, then I'm going to create matter in it, because ether does not take up space. So you cannot, you know, there's nothing you can do to prove it. Scientifically, that the Earth is folding over. I can prove the ether, you know, I can prove dielectricity, magnetism, electricity, but I can't prove the folding over. Einstein saw it, he just misunderstood what was going on. I'm telling you, Einstein was onto something, he was just wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Look into folding ether and you will see ether has to go into a singularity point because it cannot take up area. That forces the Earth to fold in on itself. That's where we get, I believe, the tetrahedron shape.
Yeah. Carrying on from you saying we're in the pyramid and there's lands like beyond the pyramid. This is something that I've been studying, obviously, through I don't know if you've seen them ancient maps where they say beyond the ice wall there's other lands, and also touch up on the North Pole where there's these supposed 4 islands, which are
I've seen those
referenced
too.
as someone referenced as being the Garden of Eden. Does that tie into the diamond model as well?
Well, as to the 4 northern islands, now I have seen a couple maps with these 4 islands, and they are indeed separated by 4 rivers, which is what Scripture does and seem to indicate could be the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
I do believe that could be all the way up north in the very northern point of the diamond.
Yep.
However, there's more land outside of this whole place. But the thing is this is literally we're literally locked in a hypercube
dimension.
Yeah, we're literally locked in a hypercube, a tetrahedron hypercube where you'll never be able to get out. You know, it's like that movie, The Cube, almost. You go out one side, you pop right back in another.
Yeah.
And again, it's not popping, it's just that it's folded in on itself. How they managed to do that tells you right there just how advanced they are outside here. That they could create a space that folds in on itself within a space, which, as I just told you, we can't do.
Yeah.
But, yeah, there could be lands that we have no clue about. The American Indians, everybody talks about. There's Mount Meru.
Yep, see, I wanted to talk to you about as well, actually. So would Mount Meru, that's supposedly at the North Pole, and what's your ideas on the Black Sun as well?
Well, there's two ideas on that. One idea is that the Black Sun is literally our yellow sun, but you can't see its true black, much smaller black form in there. It's supposed to be the source of Vril. There's others, you know, if they follow the round Earth theory, they think the Black Sun's actually on the reverse side of Earth. I've seen that theory also.
Yep.
Personally, I think what you're calling the Black Sun, very well could be this black celestial ball that I was just telling you about, that is space itself, that when it folds over, it's going to form a shape, and that these shapes is what's reflecting these stars. As this shape spins, it appears to be spinning stars on the walls, just like a spinning lampshade in your living room on a lamp. So I'm not quite 100%, you know, I'm still doing a whole lot of theorizing and not a whole lot of proving it.
What about the Aurora Borealis and the Australis? Because there's some at the south and some at the north as well, isn't there?
Right, you have the Northern Lights, then you have the Aurora Australis, which is the Southern Lights, because both poles have the lights, and we know that the poles are Jacob and Boaz.
Yeah.
I believe these are actual literal poles, perhaps. They might not be solid poles, and we're told that when the Masons wrote down their secrets before they were called Masons, when they were preparing for the world flood, that they made these two pillars, and that they made them out of completely different materials so that one would float in water and no matter what. And they had these specifications of why they made it two different materials. But I believe Noah's Ark is the Ark of our firmament. That's one theory.
Yeah, I've got a couple of. That's one of them as well, because I've was looking into, you know, Santos was presenting the Royal Arch. You know, like like you got Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer.
Right.
Like it's like the top half of the zodiac, basically. A lot of people say that it's an allegory for that.
Yeah, and the arch, that is, you know, it's another big thing. You know, you see the arch all through Masonic symbolism.
Yeah.
And again, that's, you know, I believe it's the arch of the dome. It could be the arch of a Taurus.
Yeah.
That's what I believe Noah's Ark is. It's not a boat. I believe Noah's Ark is the Ark of the dome, and the windows at the top of the ark are the same windows of heaven that we're told about in scriptures, and that's where Nimrod was headed to. He was trying to get out of here and find out what's in them lands. And that's why we're finding drowning or astronauts half drowned. Who was that? Luca Parmiano or something like that his name was. That astronaut just a year or so ago allegedly almost drowned in space because he got like a gallon of water in his spacesuit. And no one could figure out why. You know, the flat earthers were saying, well, that's because they're practicing in their pool, and, you know, and his suit sprung a leak. And I'm like, yeah, that's possible. Yeah, he could have been practicing in the NASA pool. They got a whole, you know, that whole space station thing, that's in a pool. That's how they do all that filming, is down there in their pool.
Even the word astronaut, well, if you look at the word naught, connects with nautical, and that's to do with water as well, isn't it? Like ships traveling, water and stuff.
Right. So yeah, I think the reason why they're drowning, or not drowning, but I believe the reason that astronaut almost drowned, I bet you they weren't practicing in their pool. I bet you they figured out how to get out of this place. And they're swimming because this is Noah's Ark, and the earth still is flooded with water.
Yeah.
And I bet you that's why they wear the suits that they wear, because they're trained in the pool, because when you get outside here, you're going to be in water. Because let's face it, if space were a vacuum and there was space outside here, well, then you would be practicing in a vacuum, and you would build a suit that would allow you to survive in a vacuum. I don't care if you put 10 suits on one astronaut. You put them in that, in that vacuum, it's going to rip them apart. It's going to completely pull them apart. It'll pull every piece of blood out of his body, period. So obviously we're not going in the vacuum. Where do our astronauts train? They train in water. Why would you train in water unless where you're going, you're going to be in water?
Yeah.
You don't train in the desert if your job is to go to the jungle.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Another thing I was going to touch up on, which sparked my mind when I knew I was going to talk to you. And like, obviously, in the Diamond Square model, the constellations are going round, but the sun and moon go from east to west. And I was watching a presentation done by Manly P. Hall, and he was talking about how, although we've got we've got 7 luminaries in the sky,
right?
He really kept emphasizing how the 5 and the 2, like the moon and the sun, were a lot more special than the other 5, and he correlated it to even the way the week goes. Like we work Monday to Friday and we have 2 days off,
right.
And this kind of made me think of your model, because it would make sense, because the sun and the moon are the 2 special ones doing a different movement than to the stars, and that kind of.
Well,
when
I do notice that the moon does seem, especially the moon, because that's faster than the sun. What's the moon travel? I think it's 2,288 miles an hour, is it?
I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah, I would actually have to look it up. I can look it up. But yeah, it does definitely have its, and another thing you can notice about that is, we talked about last time, is that both the sun and the moon both give off completely different lights.
Yep.
You have a yellow, orange, red type thing going on with sunlight, but you have a whitish silver thing going on with the moonlight.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, for our listeners, a little experiment you can do, very simple. Go outside in the night when there's a full moon. Take the temperature out in the open where there's no shadow underneath the moon, and then go stand in the shadow and take the temperature. And you will discover that it's warmer in the shade. That's telling you that the moon is causing the earth to cool down, or it's radiating a cool light, one or the other.
You see, sorry, brother, to finish, and I'll tell you after. Sorry, I don't mean to keep.
I wasn't saying that. Go ahead, speak, bro.
Because a lot of people see like the moon as a female and the sun as male.
Yes.
The sun is electric. But Thanos was explaining that in India it's the opposite. They see like the sun as radiating light, and it's expanding light, where the moon gives like more direct, cold dielectric light.
That was my understanding also. And that's why I didn't quite understand, because I used to have people, during my research, they would tell me, well, Allah is actually the moon god, And I used to think, but the moon's feminine. I don't understand how you're telling me this.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's how I was born and raised too. It's the same thing. The sun was literally Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the male, masculine aspect of God. And his other eye would be the moon, which is the female aspect of God.
Yeah.
That's how I was raised to think about it. But again, these are belief systems. We have our belief systems. They're not arbitrarily based. It's based on information that we've gathered throughout our years.
I think that personally, like the original man, I also think they are both, in the sense that, because I can see why the sun is seen as male, because obviously it penetrates the earth to make things grow, but its effect is more of a radiation, which is magnetism, and vice versa with the moon. Whereas the moon's
yeah, actually, I can see where you're going with that, because
you get what I mean? Whereas like it's like the effects and
because
what
the
they
sun
actually
gives
are
birth.
two different things.
The sun gives life, and only
That radiates.
Only a female can give life.
Yeah.
But the moon, what's that do? It cools down, it
Exactly.
destroys, it causes death. That is the warrior, that is the mark of the male. So yeah, I can see how they would switch them up.
Yeah.
And that is an interesting thing there.
Yeah. I'm just looking at my notes to see if there was anything else that we was going to touch up on. But is there anything else that you wanted to add, brother?
No, I think I pretty much covered most of it, without going into another 2-hour lecture about something.
But yeah, it's the thing is with when we talk about these type of subjects, you can go on and on and on.
Yeah, that's the problem. I try so hard to keep it, not so long.
Yeah.
I know sometimes people just don't want to sit down and listen to 3-hour